What happens when one of the most powerful men in wrestling, a guy who built an entire empire and trained a generation of legends, makes one fatal mistake that cost him everything? This is the story of how Verne Gagne's American Wrestling Association, the AWA, had the wrestling world in the palm of its hand, and how his loyalty to his family might have been the very thing that let Vince McMahon and the WWE conquer the industry. This isn't just a story about a fallen promotion. It's a clash of philosophies, a tale of two kings, and a warning about how even the strongest empires can crumble from within. This is the story of the AWA. To understand the AWA, you first have to understand the man who built it, Verne Gagne. Before he was a promoter, Gagne was one of the most decorated and legitimate athletes in American history. A standout in multiple sports, he went to the University of Minnesota, where he became a celebrated champion, winning 2 NCAA Division I wrestling titles and becoming the university's first ever 4-time Big Ten champion. He even had a brief run with the Chicago Bears before finding his true calling in professional wrestling. In the 1950s, pro wrestling was a patchwork of regional territories, all operating under the National Wrestling Alliance, or NWA. Think of the NWA as a cartel, a group of powerful promoters who decided amongst themselves who would be the world heavyweight champion. The champ was a traveling attraction, but the real power lay with a board that often picked its champion based on politics, not who was best for business. Verne Gagne was a massive TV superstar, one of the most recognized athletes in America thanks to early broadcast on the Dumont network. He was a phenomenal draw, a legitimate badass, and the undeniable top contender. But he was repeatedly denied a run with the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Fed up with the backroom politics, Gagne decided that if they wouldn't let him rule their kingdom, he'd just build his own. In 1960, Gagne and his business partner, Wally Carbo, officially broke away from the NWA. They took over the Minneapolis Boxing and Wrestling Club and rebranded it as the American Wrestling Association. In a brilliant move, they recognized the reigning NWA champion, Pat O'Connor, as the first AWA world champion and gave him 90 days to defend the title against Gagne. The NWA, of course, ignored the challenge. So on August 16, 1960, the AWA stripped O'Connor of the title and awarded it to the man they knew was the real champion all along, Verne Gagne. While Gagne was the face of the AWA, Wally Carbo was the quiet genius behind the scenes. Carbo was a sharp promoter who'd been in the business since the 1930s. While Gagne understood what made a great match, Carbo understood the business of wrestling. He managed the books, negotiated with arenas, and navigated the complex political landscape. Their expansion model wasn't about hostile takeovers. They built partnerships, creating strongholds in cities like Chicago, Milwaukee, Denver, and Winnipeg. The AWA became the undisputed powerhouse of the Midwest, a huge and profitable territory built on believability and respect for the sport. Gagne's own star power as a 10-time AWA world champion cemented the promotion's identity. The title was prestigious because he was prestigious. He filled his roster with tough, believable wrestlers who defined the AWA style. Guys like the brutal Mad Dog Vachon, the charismatic Crusher, and the flawless Nick Bockwinkel. From this foundation, an empire would rise, an empire that would soon produce the biggest stars in the world and find itself on a collision course with a new force rising in the Northeast. By the late 70s and early 80s, the AWA wasn't just a wrestling promotion. It was a star factory. Verne Gagne's training camp, held in a cold, unforgiving barn on his property, was legendary. He didn't look for bodybuilders first. He looked for athletes. Gagne believed in old school, valuing legitimate amateur backgrounds and technical skill above all else. His philosophy was simple. If you could wrestle for real, you could learn to work for a crowd. And that philosophy cranked out a who's who of future legends. A brash young man named Ric Flair learned his craft there. A cocky powerhouse named Jesse Ventura developed his famous persona. The AWA's rings were the proving ground for men like Curt Hennig, a second-generation prodigy, and a young athletic Scott Hall, who was honing the skills that would later make him a household name. The AWA style was a world away from the burgeoning World Wrestling Federation in the Northeast, run by Vince McMahon Sr. While the WWF was leaning into cartoonish superheroes, the AWA presented itself as a legitimate sport. The matches were longer, the psychology was deeper, and the champions were seen as the best pure wrestlers in the world. It was a product for the thinking fan, the fan who appreciated the art of a headlock as much as a body slam. And the fans responded. At its peak, the AWA was arguably the most successful wrestling company in America. They weren't just running small armories, they were drawing huge crowds, reportedly packing over 20,000 fans into Chicago's Comiskey Park for major shows. Their TV program, All-Star Wrestling, was a ratings juggernaut in the Midwest, a Saturday morning ritual for an entire generation. This success didn't go unnoticed. In the early 1980s, a young, ambitious Vincent Kennedy McMahon bought the WWF from his father with a revolutionary vision. He didn't see wrestling as regional territories. He saw a national entertainment monopoly. And the biggest obstacle in his way wasn't the old NWA, but the talent-rich empire Verne Gagne had built in Minneapolis. McMahon feared the AWA because it had everything he wanted: a deep roster, a loyal fan base, and a strong television presence, including a deal with a fledgling cable network called ESPN. The AWA was more than a competitor. It was a direct challenge to McMahon's vision for wrestling. That rivalry would be defined by one man more than any other: a charismatic 6'7" blonde giant with 24-inch pythons and an insane connection with the crowd. He'd been let go by Vince McMahon Sr. for taking a role in Rocky III, but in the AWA, he became a phenomenon. His name was Hulk Hogan. In the AWA, Hulkamania was born. Hogan was a rock star, selling out arenas and whipping fans into a frenzy. He was the biggest draw the AWA had ever seen, and his feud with champion Nick Bockwinkel was the hottest ticket in the country. It seemed inevitable that Gagne would put the championship on Hogan and build his company's future around this megastar. But Verne Gagne had a blind spot. Hogan wasn't a technical wrestler, he was an entertainer. To Gagne, he just didn't fit the mold. This hesitation, this loyalty to an old-school philosophy, would prove to be a crack in the foundation of his empire. Vince McMahon saw that crack, and he was about to drive a wedge right through it. The year 1986 was the tipping point, the moment the AWA's slow decline went into a free fall. It started not in the ring, but in the boardroom. Wally Carbo, the business mastermind who had co-founded the AWA with Verne, sold his stake in the company. Carbo's departure was a massive blow. He was the pragmatist to Gagne's traditionalist. Without Carbo, the checks and balances were gone. Verne was now solely at the helm, and his judgment would be guided by something far more dangerous than business: family loyalty. Meanwhile, Vince McMahon's national expansion was in full swing. He had successfully raided the AWA for its biggest star, Hulk Hogan, and built the WWF around him. He also poached top-tier talent like announcer Mean Gene Okerlund and manager Bobby the Brain Heenan, stealing not just the wrestlers, but the very personality of the promotion. McMahon was systematically taking over the wrestling world. So Vince McMahon came to Minneapolis. The story goes that he sat down with Verne and his son Greg Gagne and made a serious offer to buy the American Wrestling Association. Accounts from those involved suggest the figure was in the millions, a huge sum in the mid-'80s that would have secured Verne's future for life. But the deal hit a fatal snag. Verne had one non-negotiable condition. He didn't just want a payout. He wanted a guaranteed job for his son Greg within the new WWF structure. Greg was a talented wrestler, a multi-time tag team champion, but Verne's insistence on his son's job security was a deal-breaker for McMahon. As Greg Gagne has recalled, they drove Vince to the airport after the meeting. As McMahon got out of the car, he turned around and uttered 4 words that sealed the AWA's fate. "I don't negotiate." Then he walked away, and they never heard from him about a sale again. This was Verne Gagne's multi-million-dollar mistake. It was a moment born not of business strategy, but of a father's loyalty. By prioritizing his son over selling his company at its peak value, he completely misread the man he was dealing with. Vince McMahon wasn't an old-school promoter playing by rules of honor. He was a corporate predator who saw a vulnerability and now knew he didn't need to buy the AWA. He could simply let it die and pick up the carcass for pennies on the dollar. The downward spiral was immediate. With no sale and a promoter who was seen as increasingly out of touch, the remaining top talent saw the writing on the wall. The WWF offered bigger money and national exposure. The AWA couldn't compete. Stars like Rick Martel, the Rockers, and eventually the prized Curt Hennig all left for the WWF. Each departure was another nail in the coffin. The arenas got emptier. The TV ratings faded. The AWA was hemorrhaging talent and money, trapped in a vicious cycle. Weaker rosters led to lower attendance, which meant less revenue, making it impossible to retain the stars needed to compete. Verne Gagne had outsmarted the entire wrestling world to build his empire, but in a single negotiation, he had been completely outmaneuvered. The kingdom was crumbling. In a desperate attempt to create buzz, the promotion stumbled through a series of bizarre gimmicks. The final major push was the Team Challenge series, a convoluted tournament that produced matches like the infamous Turkey on a Pole match. It was a far cry from the prestigious world title bouts that once defined the company. The ESPN deal, which should have been a lifeline, became an anchor. The AWA was often bumped for other live sports, and its production values looked amateurish next to the slick presentation of the WWF. Then came the financial troubles. At the Super Clash 3 pay-per-view in 1988, Gagne allegedly failed to pay several top stars, including Jerry the King Lawler, which destroyed the AWA's reputation among wrestlers. The end finally came in 1991. With dwindling crowds, no major TV presence, and mounting debts, Verne Gagne officially filed for bankruptcy. The American Wrestling Association was no more. But the legacy of the AWA didn't disappear. In a final ironic twist, the empire Verne refused to sell to Vince McMahon was eventually acquired by him anyway. In 2006, World Wrestling Entertainment purchased the AWA's extensive tape library, absorbing its history into their own. Today, the AWA lives on through the WWE network, its matches and stars introduced to new generations by the very company that caused its demise. The story of the AWA is a classic lesson in adaptability. Verne Gagne built his company on tradition and legitimacy. For decades, this was his greatest strength. But when the landscape of wrestling changed, that strength became his fatal flaw. His refusal to evolve, his unwillingness to anoint an entertainer like Hulk Hogan as his champion, and his ultimate decision to choose family over a sound business exit, all sealed his fate. He outsmarted the NWA's political machine and built a kingdom that for a time was the most successful in America. He created a factory that produced some of the biggest stars the industry has ever known, but he was ultimately outsmarted by a new kind of promoter who didn't play by the old rules. The fall of the AWA wasn't just the end of a company, it was the end of the territory system and the final victory in Vince McMahon's war to conquer the wrestling world. The history of wrestling is filled with these incredible what-if moments. If you want to dive deeper into the stories that shape the sport, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. And let me know in the comments, do you think the AWA could have survived if Verne Gagne had put the title on Hulk Hogan? In the end, Verne Gagne, the master strategist and champion's champion, made a choice. He chose his son's security over the sale of his kingdom, and in doing so, handed the keys to his rival. It stands as one of the most critical decisions in wrestling history, a single moment that changed the industry forever. The AWA proved that in the cutthroat world of pro wrestling, even the most legendary empires can be brought down, not by an invading army, but by a single emotional decision from the king himself.